Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Now, to those who have been asking who this beautiful little creature is, this is Isabella. This is my calico, and yes, she is awesome. She has the best temperament in the world. She's my girl. Anyway, we are back with some more Alex Murdaugh. Now, we're going over the gunshot residue evidence. Now, we're going to go into one of the SLED agent's testimonies, and she's going to go into her expert opinion, break down the logistics of how gunshot residue works, and pretty much just paint on another layer of evidence against our boy, Alex Murdaugh.
SLED's guidelines say we won't try to determine if there's gunshot primer residue on somebody?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
Beyond 6 hours, we will not analyze a GSR kit from a living individual. And the reason that we will not analyze that is because in-house studies as well as peer-reviewed published studies have shown that gunshot residue so readily transfers and is so readily removed around 4 to 6 hours that beyond 6 hours it couldn't be tied back to an initial incident.
And what's the common sense answer why you won't do it after 6 hours?
So if you shoot a gun, as soon as you put that gun down, you essentially start to remove those gunshot primer residue particles. They aren't destroyed, but you're simply transferring them to other objects. You might be putting your hands in your pocket. You might touch a steering wheel. You might wash your hands, and that would remove most, if not all, of the particles. So beyond that 4 hours, you're really looking at the total removal of those particles.
So if you didn't wash your hands, just everyday living or touching, could after over 4 hours you wouldn't want to, or 6 hours, I think you said it is now.
6 hours is our policy, but an in-house study with controlled participants where we informed them that they weren't allowed to wash their hands and told them to basically stick to clerical work, we really saw that drop off around 4 hours.
If you did.
So basically, the evidence isn't good. Gunshot residue evidence on a living subject is just not good. So, if someone shot somebody today and they got arrested tomorrow and, someone was like, hey, let's test them for gunshot residue, it would make no difference. The person probably took a shower by then. The person probably washed his hands, took a piss, all that stuff. The gunshot residue would have been gone by then. That's pretty much what she's getting at.
You did wash your hands, and somebody washed their hands. They told you, hey, I washed my hands. Would you test it?
We would.
Okay. But would you expect most of them to be gone at that point from washing your hands?
It depends on how well you wash your hands.
Okay.
We expect most of it to be gone, but we've seen it to still be present even after somebody's washed their hands.
And you did a little bit, but if you can do a little bit more for me. Gunshot primer residue, is there a certain, how do you determine, is there?
And keep in mind, Alex Murdaugh went and took a shower, theoretically, right? So he went to the kennels, helped them with Pawpaw or whatever, not Pawpaw, helped them with the dog or whatever, and then went back and took a shower. So, the gunshot residue typically, or I should say, wouldn't be on Alex if he had taken a shower. Very convenient.
A certain distance, vicinity, shooting? What are you looking for in determining whether gunshot residue is present and whether someone was in the vicinity to get it?
So really what we're trying to determine when we're looking for gunshot primer residue is, one, were they in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm? Were they shooting a firearm? Or is it simply transfer? And in most cases, we can't determine whether it's vicinity, which includes shooting, or simply transfer.
Discharge, vicinity, which just means, are you close to it?
Yeah, so vicinity can be 2 to 3 feet to either side of the shooter and outwards of about 60 feet in front of the shooter.
And anybody, write it down in the comments. If you go to an outdoor range and you shoot in the wind and you're taking shots, bang, 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 you'll literally feel the excess gunshot residue hit you in the face. It's gonna kind of slap you in the face. You'll feel graininess. That's all gunshot residue, just getting all over your body. So it is a real thing, and it can be traced to you. But like she said, you'll get into the car, you'll wipe your face, you'll get rags off. It's not something that'll really stain and stay on your body. So if Alex had done this and taken a shower, it's a high chance that nothing would be on his body.
Discharge, vicinity, and transfer. What do you mean by transfer?
So you can get gunshot residue on your hands from an object that already has gunshot residue on it, or from a person who has gunshot residue on them. So if somebody else shoots a gun and you shake their hands, you could get gunshot residue on your hand that way. You could also touch a recently fired or a dirty weapon and get gunshot residue on your hands that way.
So if you had just fired the firearm and I came up to shake your hand, could I get it from that?
That is possible.
Okay.
Oh, that was a firm handshake. Her whole body shook. What's going on here? I know she's one of the guys, she's one of the agents, but dang. Hold on, let's back it up real quick.
If I reach your hand, could I get it from that?
That is possible.
She kind of smiled too. She was like, oh, respect.
It's under to grab you, to turn you. Could I get it if you had been shot with gunshot residue?
So gunshot residue does travel with the path of the bullet, so we do expect to find it on victims who have sustained gunshot wounds. And around that gunshot wound specifically, we do expect to find gunshot primer residue particles. So if you touched that area, there is the possibility of transfer.
Okay. And again, if you don't mind me touching you on the arm, if you had gunshot residue on your arm and I did that, could I get it?
That is a possibility as well.
And what's that called?
So in that case, that would be a secondary or tertiary transfer.
Transfer.
Yes.
From one item to me.
Yes, sir.
All right. And the other way is if I fired the firearm.
Yes, sir.
I know that as a fact. As from experience shooting, you can feel the particles flying back on you. If wind is blowing toward you, was that upwind? If wind is blowing toward you and you're firing against that, you'll feel the particles every time you pull the trigger. It's kind of annoying. I'm not gonna lie.
And if I fired a firearm, where do you look for to see if somebody's fired a firearm based on what they're wearing? Like if I was wearing this right now and fired something here, and you had this jacket, where would you look for potential gunshot residue?
So if I knew that was what you were wearing at the time of the shooting, we would sample from the right sleeve of that jacket, the right chest area of the jacket, the left sleeve of the jacket, and the left chest area of the jacket. We may also want to sample the tie because it's center on your chest.
And why the right sleeve and the right center? Because he would be holding it like this, bang. So it'll fly back all on the right shoulder and on the left sleeve, right? So those are the prime areas for gunshot residue, especially if it's not a pistol and you're holding the weapon with two hands.
And the right side of your pants and the left side of your pants. And then your shoes are also a possibility.
Why is that?
Because your shoes are also in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm. Sometimes we get results off of them, sometimes we don't.
Okay. And would you test my hands?
That would be the best evidence is the hands, because the hands will allow us to link it to a specific incident within 6 hours, whereas clothing, we can't tell you when it got there. And that's because on an inanimate object such as clothing, that gunshot primer residue is going to stay until it's actively removed. So you would have to brush it off, you would have to wash it off, you would have to do some activity to actually remove it from the clothing.
And that was the next thing I was going to get into. You beat me to it. So, but if I just shot and washed my hands off, potentially I could have washed it all, gunshot primer residue off, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But on inanimate objects, and you just said it, and I apologize, how long can gunshot residue stay on?
Indefinitely, if you.
Indefinitely. Now this is where Alex fucked up. He got that jacket, covered up his clothes. This is my theory. Zipped up, felt like he was a real surgical assassin. Went out there, all hoodied down, bang bang, killed them. All right, mission accomplished. Stripped the jacket off. Maybe he went over to that shed, put it up, took a shower, calls the police. The problem is he was in such a rush. He didn't think that maybe I should clean this jacket off too, Gunshot residue is all over this jacket, but he was so sure that they probably wouldn't find it. He was just like, whatever, we'll just stash this here, whatever, throw that there, clean. take a shower, clothes clean, good to go. It was almost a good plan. Almost.
You don't touch it if you're not actively moving it around or washing it. It can stay until it's removed.
Okay. Now let's just say I'm dead, okay?
Okay?
Okay.
And I got shot. Just a few feet. You shot me from, okay.
Okay.
I fall down. Would you expect to have gunshot residue on me?
It depends on the firearm, but in general, yes.
And why is that?
So the gunshot primer residue comes out, a large majority of the gunshot primer residue comes out the muzzle of the firearm. And not only does it come out the muzzle of the firearm, but it also follows the path of the bullet. And so wherever that bullet's going, it's going to follow behind it.
And the follow-up to that is it SLED's recommendation now, if you know, like me, I've been shot, do y'all test for gunshot, or will you test for gunshot residue on a deceased person who's, you know's been killed with a firearm?
SLED will not test on victims who have sustained gunshot wounds, and we have not been testing on those victims since January of 2022.
And prior to that, was it your policy not to do that, or recommend to local law enforcement agencies not to do that?
We didn't have an official policy, but we were recommending it due to the lack of probative information that you could gain from it.
And just say that one more time. What do you mean by the lack of probative information?
So, like I said before, gunshot residue can only put somebody in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, or it could say that they transfer gunshot residue on them. So it's just putting gunshot primer residue on them. A victim's already, of a gunshot wound, has already been established to be in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, so it doesn't add any additional information to that.
I mean, we could decipher that. You know, an idiot can understand that, hey, there's a bullet hole in this person, so there was probably a gunshot. Therefore, there's gunshot residue. You know, it's obvious. So not testing for it, pretty standard. I would assume they wouldn't test for it, but, you know, makes sense. But if you want to put somebody there at the scene, you want to test them, the living person, their clothes for gunshot residue as soon as possible. But to be honest, 6 hours is not that much of a window. Most people would probably not have it on them by then.
Case.
Now, there's still other items like stippling, which you're not, do you know about stippling based in your field of expertise?
That's not in my field of expertise.
Now, let's get to this case. Forensic scientist Megan Fletcher, did you have an occasion to examine some items for a potential gunshot primer residue?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, everybody, hold up real quick. I just got to shout everybody out. You guys up to 3K subscribers so fast. That shit is crazy. I appreciate y'all. Get me up to 5K. You know, tell your grandma, your nephew, your niece, your auntie, anybody you know. Get me up to 5K. Let's keep this thing rolling. Appreciate y'all.
I'm gonna show you what Mark states, 418. And if you like gloves?
I have some with me.
Okay, and I think we also have some
Man,
here.
Miss Megan Fletcher is a goddamn professional. Would you like some gloves, ma'am? I got some with me, sir. I am a goddamn professional. Gotta love Megan Fletcher.
I thought we had a whole box here.
I think that they're on the floor.
With her little Apple Watch,
And why are you using gloves?
with her suit.
I use gloves to protect myself and to protect the evidence.
Hell yeah.
I don't want to put any of my DNA or anything that might be on myself onto the evidence, and I don't want anything that might be on the evidence on me.
And not just gloves in your laboratory. And
Now, this is one thing I'm gonna shout out, Mr. Detective Owens, the other officer. He just yanked it out of his hands. I think it's the same exact lawyer too. He was like, "Oh, just give me that. Let me show them the pants. Let me show them the pants. Let me put all my DNA on it." He didn't respect the evidence. Now he's with Miss Megan Fletcher. All of a sudden he's like, "Oh, you have gloves? Oh, okay. All right. So why did we use gloves? Oh, like it's a science project. Like, so why is there a double standard here?" Just saying.
thought I asked you to bring one, but do you wear a lab coat?
When we process clothing, we do wear lab coats, and that helps protect us from our regular clothes from transferring over any evidence onto, or not evidence, but any materials over onto the evidence.
And that's to protect the evidence, really, as much as you, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have a lab coat and gloves before you start looking at these items.
Well, this also has a DNA request on it. No time frame can be provided as to when these particles were deposited.
And as far as 418 in evidence, the shirt, can you tell where the particle lifts were? From the right sleeve, the right chest side?
Can I refer to my notes, please?
Please.
So for the white T-shirt, from the particle lift that was collected from the right sleeve, right chest area, 2 particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue were found. And from the left sleeve, left chest area, the particle lift collected from there, 1 particle characteristic of gunshot primer residue was found. Those particle lifts are combined into one result for a result of multiple particles.
What does that mean that you found two particle lifts? I mean, as far as the amount of particles you found, what does that mean in your field of expertise?
My opinion is that that object, this T-shirt, was either in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm or came into contact with something that had gunshot primer residue on it. I can't.
Oh, so we're not even talking his jacket yet. We're just doing his T-shirt and shorts. Remember that little ugly white T-shirt he was wearing? So they're talking about gunshot residue even on that. So maybe he wasn't even able to mask that even.
Tell you the likelihood, which one is more likely to have happened.
And that's your opinion, correct?
That's my opinion.
Now, also in 418, and again, these were the defendant's shirts, pants, and clothes and shoes that we're going to get to in a minute that you were examining, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
That's what the chain showed.
That's what the submission showed, yes.
Submission slip, thank you. Now, let's go to the pants. Did you have an occasion to examine the particle lifts that Ms. Hall did?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, and again, and we may not go through this every time, but can you tell the jury what you did again when you were examining the particle lifts, please?
So the particle lifts from the shorts were analyzed the same way as the particle lifts from the shirt, the same way that we analyze every particle lift that's submitted for gunshot primer residue or collected for gunshot primer residue. Goes through the automated process. I go in, I confirm or that there are particles present or that there aren't particles present.
Can you tell me, did you locate any particles and where they were on the shorts, please?
Yes, sir. On the right side, right groin area, there were 2 particles located and confirmed.
Okay, so I thought he was able to conceal the particles with the jacket. It just seems like there weren't as many particles on his T-shirt and pants, but they were still there. So, I mean, how do you explain that away, Murdaugh? Were you shooting that day? Now, maybe that was part of his testimony, but I don't believe so. And if it wasn't, then why are those particles there? You mean to tell me they just stayed on your pants for a few days? I don't know.
Confirmed. And then on the left groin area, there was 1 particle located and confirmed.
And you issued a report, and what are your findings as a result of finding these particle lists on the shorts that the submission slip said belonged to the defendant on states 418? What's your opinion?
Particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue were found. Again, my opinion is that they were this pair of shorts were either in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm or came in contact with something that had gunshot primer residue on it. Again, I can't tell you which is more likely, and I can't tell you when those particles were deposited.
So they could have come from a transfer holding a gun and then putting it on your pants?
That's correct.
Could have come from being in the vicinity of a shot?
That's correct.
Okay, so you can't be sure. And I like how the prosecutors are saying we can't be sure, but what we can be sure of is that he was around gunshot residue. Now, the Murdaugh family does have a lot of guns. You know, they're rich. They have, like, a lot of guns. So, you know, it could be argued that, you know, he was cleaning a gun that night. But it just puts you one step closer to him being around the gunshot on that day.
Could they have come from discharging?
Well, the shorts themselves can't discharge, so on an inanimate object, we just say that they're in the vicinity to the discharge.
That's what I meant, yeah, in the vicinity. Did you have an occasion to examine the lifts from Alex Murdaugh's hands that were lifted by Varnado, I believe?
Yes, sir, I did.
and they're already in evidence. And you basically, after Jamie Hall says, hey, these are all done right, they then go to you, right?
Yes, sir.
These
That's
are
not-
already in evidence.
That's not the GSR kit.
These aren't the GSR kits. Anyway, I don't think we need this in evidence. Did you have an occasion to examine the GSR kit?
I did.
It was taken from Alex Murdaugh.
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you know, you've talked about that 4-hour, 6-hour period. Again, was that checked? And did you make sure that that was collected in the time period, or you wouldn't have performed your examination?
That's correct. Not only is it checked by the person inventorying, in this case Jamie Hall, before I will sign off on that inventory sheet, I also double check the GSR information form. That GSR information form that is included in the kit is also scanned, so we retain a record of it so that I can go back and double check that it was within the 6 hours.
Okay, so you did that.
I did.
All right. And what was your, did your examination conclude as far as the particle lift that was taken from the defendant, Alex Murdaugh?
So one particle lift was collected from his right hand and one from his left hand. One particle characteristic of gunshot primer residue was found. In general, particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue are microscopic, molten particles that contain the elements lead, barium, and antimony. Gunshot primer residue can come from the discharging of a firearm, being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, or coming into contact with a surface that has gunshot primer residue on it.
So my boy Alex didn't even wash his hands properly. He didn't even get the GSR off of his hands. I would have got that shit off my hands, because we already had the testimony that most or all of the GSR will be washed off if you wash your hands properly. Please, I would have been scrubbing that shit with bleach. I would have been out here getting rid of evidence. But hey, Alex Murdaugh thought he was invincible.
And y'all are going to say that conclusion if it's got just a few particle lifts or a bunch of them, right?
I'm sorry.
Just
what-
a general conclusion, that's what you're going to find, that there are particle lifts, and it can come from one of those 3 ways, right?
Yes, sir.
Discharge, vicinity.
For hands, we have one of those 3 ways. For clothing, we only have the vicinity and the transfer.
Right. So is that consistent? If I grabbed one of these firearms and handed it to an officer, would that be consistent with your findings? You can get it from a transfer of a firearm?
You could get one particle from transferring, from a firearm, yes.
If you fired a firearm and washed your hands and then grabbed a firearm and handed it to a police officer, would that be consistent with that also?
Well, you still had that transfer from the firearm. It didn't really matter what you did prior to that. You still could have had that one particle on your hands from that transfer of the firearm. So this is, I had to Google this because I'm not super familiar with a seatbelt assembly. This is considered the buckle. This is the part that everybody sees in their vehicle. This bottom portion is what is in between the center console and the seat and not exposed when a person is sitting in the vehicle.
So if I'm driving, is this going to be on my right side?
It should be on your right side, yes.
Okay. And what is this?
The next part that everybody's familiar with is the latch plate, which goes into the buckle. And then there's an entire belt that goes into the retractor wheel.
Can you
And
pull
it-
that? Let's pull it. Don't let it go.
I got it.
Where did y'all attempt, you and Ms. Hall attempt to get particle lifts?
So we stretched it out as far as it would go, and we took samples, 3 samples from the belt, front, or both sides, and we just divided it into 3 sections and took samples from those 3 sections.
And this was an abnormal item that you assisted Ms. Hall with?
Yes, sir.
Will you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the results of your examination, if any?
Yes, sir. One particle characteristic of gunshot primer residue was found. In general, particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue are microscopic molten particles that contain the elements lead, barium, and antimony.
So basically there's gunshot residue on his hands, there's gunshot residue on his clothing, there was gunshot residue in his truck that he was moving around in that day. It's everywhere. So he couldn't really completely remove that GSR from anywhere. and it all happens to be on that same day because you have a 4 to 6 hour period. Now, keep in mind, inanimate objects, sure, they'll stay there indefinitely, but it's more than likely going to be coming from that day if they're testing it and there's GSR in all the convenient areas, including the stuff that was on his body that he's rubbing stuff against, that he's, brushing off, all of that.
Testimony. Gunshot primer residue can come from being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm or coming into contact with a surface that has gunshot primer residue on it. However, no information can be provided as to the time frame in which this particle was deposited.
So in common sense term, how could that get on the seatbelt? Where did you actually find the particle?
The particle was located on the particle lift collected from the buckle, so that piece with the red button.
Clicking it after pulling
Just
the
in
trigger.
common sense, in your expert opinion, how could that particle get on that buckle?
Objection.
It could be from touching something that has gunshot primer residue on it, or possibly being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm.
So it could be a transfer.
It's probably most likely a transfer, yes, sir.
Say, why is it probably most likely a transfer?
It's just usually not exposed to the vicinity. If there isn't a gunshot out of that vehicle, then transfer is the most likely scenario.
Just makes sense, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, you submitted another petition.
Mr. Waters over there is just on his phone. He knows they got this. He's over there texting his female on Twitter real quick, like, "Hey, what you doing?" He's over on his phone chilling. He's like, my guys got this, man. We're talking about GSR. GSR is everywhere. It's a GSR fest. Come on now, people.
Potential piece of evidence in this case, forensic
Yes.
scientist Megan Fletcher.
Yes, sir, I was.
And what was that?
This was a blue rain jacket, kind of poncho type jacket.
Do you know when that came into your custody, when you looked at it the first time?
October 5th, 2021.
It looks like it's on a table or something.
It's actually on two tables. It was large enough in order for us to be able to lay it out. We had to put two tables together.
Large enough you had to put two tables together?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And why is it on this white, what's it on, what's underneath?
Underneath it is butcher paper, and that's used to protect the item of evidence, but also used to collect any trace evidence that may need to be examined.
And it looks like on the right, there may be a ruler or a measurement.
Yes, it was just a sticker with ruler on it just to help guide us with the general size of it. We didn't take any specific measurements of anything.
But is it fair to say that that's how it looked when you saw it in October?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, October 8th?
October 5th.
5th, of 21. This report was dated October 8th. I apologize.
Here he is with the washed out red hair. He always has this like stoic, shocked face, like, "Oh my God, my family's killed." But at the same time, we all know he did it. Like, bro, you can just drop the act. Maybe it's just stress. Maybe at this point he's just stressing out about going to jail.
You were with Miss Hall. You had your jacket on, your gloves on, your mask on.
Yes, sir.
And tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, did it take two of you to do this?
Yes, sir, it did.
Why?
So I gave Jamie Hall direct instructions on where to collect from, and while she was doing that, I was taking the notes.
Double teaming it.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to try not to get too close to you, man. I apologize, but 226. Is that what's depicted?
Here he goes, ruining
I can
evidence
look
again.
at them.
She's so trained to put the gloves on. She just has them ready.
This jacket is the jacket I examined. My lab number, the item number 173, my initials, and the date in which we examined it is on there.
And is this the same picture of what we just showed, 430, I think.
It's the same image that you just, or this is the jacket that was in the image you just showed.
What'd you start with? Collecting potential particle lifts or particle lifts.
So in total, we collected 25 particle lifts from the jacket. When I say we covered everything, we covered everything. We collected from the exterior of the hood, the right sleeve, the left sleeve, the right chest, the left chest. There's a middle pocket on the jacket, so we collected the whole middle section, including the pocket. The pocket also has like a hand warmer section. It's got a little bit of fleece inside. We collected from inside of that. And then we split the bottom half in two, collected one particle lift from the right side and one from the left.
How much you want to bet that GSR was on every single section of that jacket? I bet you. I almost could bet money on it.
And flipped the jacket over and took one particle lift from the right sleeve into the right back on the top of the jacket, the left sleeve into the back on the top of the jacket. Let me check this real quick. The back sample, the lower half was again split in half, and the right side was collected as well as the left side.
Why, you said it, you flipped it over and checked the inside.
Yes, we turned it inside out and also collected samples from the inside.
Had you done that before?
I don't believe I've done an interior unless it was explicitly stated that somebody was wearing a shirt or a coat inside out.
So you actually turned it inside out?
Correct.
And tell them what you and Ms. Hall did.
Significant number of particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue on the inside of this jacket, yes.
How many did you determine?
I confirmed 38 particles characteristic.
Damn. So they flipped the jacket inside out and they got 38 gunshot residue particles inside the jacket. Now, if that jacket wasn't used to shoot something, I don't know what they were doing. They must have been blowing up dynamite inside the jacket. You know, the 4th of July, little sticks of dynamite that you could blow up. That's the only thing I could think of. So definitely used to shoot something. Crazy.
Saying determined, confirmed. You confirmed how many?
38.
38.
Yes, sir.
From the inside of the rain jacket, poncho?
Yes, sir.
Whatever this is, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you, and you taught me a word too, is there something that kind of led you, there could have been more, but you just basically stopped checking?
So if we go back to when I talked about the automated analysis, it gives me a list of candidate features that may contain lead, barium, and antimony. There were significantly more particles were listed as candidate features containing the elements lead, barium, and antimony. I had to make an analyst decision based on my experience to stop at the number that I did.
Candidate features,
Yes, sir.
which meant if you went on, you would expect to find more gunshot primer residue, correct?
It could. I would have had to still check the morphology. I would have had to make sure that they were molten around. I also have.
So basically, she found 35 and there was so much more potentials for gunshot residue, she didn't even bother. So that basically tells you people that that jacket was definitely part of this crime. Now, we don't know when and how, but I'm pretty sure he was trying to use it as some sort of, concealment to cover the gunshot residue off of his own body and then hide that later on. But that's crazy, man. He was in here really trying to be Mr. Assassin, really trying to take out his family the professional way. But anyways, people, if you enjoyed this video, let me know. I appreciate all the new subscribers. I love y'all. To all the OGs, I appreciate you guys for rocking with me. We're going to keep that content coming strong. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, stay inside, stay safe. I love y'all. Peace.